For centuries, milk was consumed locally in poor rural areas by the very people who produced it. Today, 223 billion liters of it are consumed every year, enough to fill 90,000 Olympic swimming pools, and it's actually more popular in urban areas. Global milk production, trade, and consumption are all at all-time highs. How did this happen? Well, in the two countries that lead the world in milk consumption, the US and India, private and public agents collaborated to shape the cultural meaning and perceived value of milk. First, let's look at the rise of milk and its meaning in India from the latter half of the 20th century to the present. In India, cows have always been culturally valued, but milk was not consumed much outside of the villages it was produced in for centuries. That was until Operation Flood or the White Revolution in 1970. The National Dairy Development Board partnered with Amul, a private dairy company, to organize dairy farmers into cooperatives, making dairy more profitable for farmers to produce and more accessible to people in India's urban areas. As a result, India is now the world's leading producer of milk, and more interestingly, India's per capita milk consumption increased by 240%. What created the market for all this dairy? The answer is that the government and private companies like Amul, Mother Dairy, and Nandini, through careful marketing, crafted a meaning around milk that increased its perceived value. The influence of these private companies' advertisements are difficult to overstate. According to one survey, Amul is the #1 brand in India. With their brand power, these companies began to assign meaning to milk. Because the White Revolution featured technological advancements and rose incomes, milk was already associated with the modernization and a strengthening notion economically. But through adverts like this one from Mother Dairy saying your country needs you, grow faster, and health and nutrition endorsements from the government, it also became associated with both an individual and a national strengthening physically. In a rising nation within a few decades of attaining sovereignty, advertisers were sure to capitalize on Indian national pride. Note that there's actually no clear link between milk and physical growth. As a result of this, today, India is both the world's largest absolute producer and consumer of cow and buffalo milk in the world. In the United States, milk carried many of the same associations as it did in India for decades, but its meaning began to change significantly as marketing adapted to the popularity of soft drinks and the prevalence of obesity. Like in India, milk was associated with individual health, but unlike in India, milk advertising did not appeal to consumers' national pride. When the U.S. National Dairy Council first declared milk consumption an essential piece of health for children in the 1910s, it was immediately backed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And soon after, the government initiated school milk subsidies and lunch programs, and the rise of milk was set in motion. Although the association between milk and modernization existed as it did in India, it was less important than its perceived link to individual nutrition and bone strength. To this day, people believe that milk's high calcium content helps strengthen bones, especially in children, but this is a falsehood generated from a clever marketing tactic. Real studies of milk and calcium supplements showed no significant impact on bone strength. But during the 1930s, rickets disease, marked by weakened bones due to vitamin D deficiency, was a real problem in the US. To combat this, milk companies began adding vitamin D to their milk and were able to claim that it would help prevent rickets disease and any bone weakening that might be caused by it. So milk doesn't actually strengthen your bones, it just added vitamin D that can help you mitigate against rickets disease, which is already extremely rare in the US today. Nonetheless, American advertisers continue to emphasize milk's powers to grow and strengthen its consumers. The more recent, the Got Milk ad campaigns of the 1990s and early 2000s are perfect examples of this. Pictured here is Superman extolling the virtues of milk as a way to grow and strengthen bones. The ads were commissioned by a partnership between private California dairy processors and the California Department of Food and Agriculture. Up until the mid 20th century, milk's meaning in the US was the mirror of milk's meaning in India, save for the missing nationalist messaging and a lesser emphasis on modernization. With the rise of soft drinks and obesity in the latter half of the 20th century, however, milk consumption declined by 76% in the US during the same time period, more than tripled in India, and its meaning began to change. Americans were now more preoccupied with childhood obesity than with growth, and as such, milk advertisers began to alter their messaging to make people view milk as a weight loss drink, a departure from previous messaging. A perfect example of this is that Got Milk ads have begun to feature winners of the show The Biggest Loser instead of athletes and superheroes. Note there's actually, again, no clear link between milk and weight loss. As a result of all this, milk consumption in the United States has fallen off, and its meaning in American culture is departing further and further from both its meaning in India and its meaning in the US just a few decades ago. In conclusion, Milk is a commodity that carries with it many associations: healthy, natural, nutritious, strong, and so on. But it's important as consumers to understand just how much these associations and meanings were strategically cultivated by advertisers. You should still definitely enjoy a cold glass of milk every once in a while, but beware that milk may not be as nutritious or natural as it's currently perceived to be in our cultures.